Okay, for the squash and stretch assignment, we're going to make this ball bounce back and forth. And we're going to make it a looping animation. So I'll explain what it takes to make a looping animation. But now we're getting into using rigs. Okay, so a rig is bones. Okay, so like if it was a person, we would have like finger bones and arm bones and spine bones and leg bones that would move around the character. But in this case, we've got our main control and two controls to make this thing stretch out or squash. So to use this, we have to click on this, okay, and we have to be in pose mode. And pose mode will make this blue. So when we select one of these bones, it'll be blue. So here's our main control. Okay, so here's, you can use move, rotate, or scale to move this thing around. Well, we'll use move tool, not rotate or scale. We'll use move. But I'm just gonna use the shortcut keys to grab. So G is grab. And then if I push Z right after G, then I can lock it to go up and down. So this is our main control to move up and down, and this is our squash and stretch control. So the reason we use squash and stretch, so stretch simulates motion blur. So wave your hand fast in front of you, you see that your hand is blurry. And we want to simulate that within our animation. And then the squash is meant to show impact. So if you were jumping, your body would stretch out and then squash down when you land. Your knees bend, everything bends. So we're simulating that kind of thing with this ball. So it's going to squash when it hits the ground, stretch back up when it goes back in the air, and then go back to normal speed. So when an object is going slow, we don't have motion blur. It's only when it's moving fast. So we're going to do slow in, slow out, like you did with the last assignment. And as this thing speeds up, the spacing here is going to increase. Okay? And we want 3 frames of it down on the ground because it's going to be stretched, then squashed, then stretched again to go back up into the air. Okay? So let's go here now. So I've got these. We're going to do the position first, and then we'll do squash and stretch. So let's set our first keyframe, I, location, and then I'm just going to press my left or my right arrow 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And we're not going to worry about our timing. The timing will just be even, okay? So I'm going to move my ball now. Press I and location. I also have auto key turned on, so now when I move it, it will automatically add that keyframe, but you have to set your first keyframe before you can do that. So now I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 on the right arrow. Move this down. 1, 2, 3. Right arrow. I'll move that down. 1, 2, 3 frames. And now it hits the ground. And I'm going to leave this for 3 frames. So I'm just going to go over 2. And let's set another keyframe. So now these 2 frames are exactly the same. So it's going to stay on the ground for 1, 2, 3 frames. Now from this one, frame 15, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Let's move that back up here. 1, 2, 3. Move that up to this one. 1, 2, 3. To this one, and then 1, 2, 3, and then we're back to here. Now here's the thing. I want this to loop perfectly, so my last frame is frame 27, so I'm going to set my end frame here to 27. And if I press play, you'll notice something happens. I have a different position for the start and end. So for it to loop perfectly, we need to select the first frame, and we're going to right click, duplicate key, select that one, right click, duplicate, and then move that to the end, and you'll see that snapped back down. So now when I loop it, it's perfectly looping. Okay, so the first and last frame have to be exact same in order for something to loop. Alright, so now let's add the squash and stretch. So I don't want any stretch here because the ball's moving slow. Okay, so I'm going to set my first keyframe here so it's not stretched. Then as the spacing goes more, I'm going to stretch that out. And the faster an object is going, the more you would stretch it out. So this isn't moving very fast, so I'm not going to stretch it that much. I'll probably even do less than that, something like that. Okay, and then go to my next keyframe. So it's still squashed or stretched out before it makes contact. So we're going to set that one. And then go to the very next frame, squash this down. And the very next frame, stretch that back up. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We want it to stay stretched here, so I'm going to set my keyframe. 1, 2, 3. This is where it's going to reset back. Okay, now you can try to move this back into place, but the way you make it go back to the original state is you're going to press Alt G, and that will reset the position of this object. Okay, so now when I press play, let's get rid of that just so you can see it. We've got nice squash and stretch. It's got nice slow in and slow out. Okay, and make sure that when you're doing this assignment, you have closer spacing up here. Then it starts to spread out, and then it'll go back up.